The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 156. Even though Trey and Tim are gone, the future of Michigan basketball looks bright. That and more on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. For Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. It was a season we'll all remember, and Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway, two players we will not soon forget. We'll miss them next season, but with our returning core of players and a highly rated freshman class on the way, we have every right to be excited about the future. On today's Michigan Gameday, Wolverine beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News joins us with a final look back at this Michigan team we enjoyed so much this past season. We'll also take a peek into the future and see what Rod thinks about next season. But first, let's get our Wolverine Warm-ups in. Program reminder for all my listeners, we're going to our summer schedule for May, June, and July. We're not going away, just scaling back to 2 shows a month. In August, we'll return to our weekly programming as we prepare for the upcoming football season, which is not that far away. So our next show will publish on May 8th and then again on May 22nd, so mark that down on your calendar. We have some great shows planned for the summer, so please keep tuning in. Mitch McGarry and Glenn Robinson III announced last week at a joint presser that they're staying put, at least for 1 more year. With that announcement, I think a sigh of relief could be heard throughout Wolverine Nation. Great news. Coach Carol Hutchins is at it again. The Wolverines are once again on top of the Big Ten standings and have climbed to number 9 in this week's poll. They swept Iowa last weekend and have a full slate of action this week. Coach Eric Bakich's surprising young baseball team is on a tear, led by a solid pitching staff, in particular freshman sensation Evan Hill, and some timely hitting and great defense. They head into this week's play at 22-16 overall, 8-4 in the Big Ten. It was a huge weekend for Michigan Gymnastics. They joined men's swimming by winning the NCAA National Championship over the weekend. And while the women fell short of that goal, junior Joanna Sampson brought home an individual title, winning the floor exercise at the Women's Nationals held at Pauley Pavilion in LA. Congratulations to both men's and women's gymnastics for another great season. We'll have more on all these stories coming up later on Wolverine Quick Hits. Next up on Michigan Gameday, Wolverine beat writer Rod Beard will be joining us with a look back at a memorable ride with Michigan basketball. And a look ahead to what appears to be another exciting season in the wings. That's next here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Joining us today, Michigan basketball beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News as we bring some closure to the Michigan basketball season. Rod, now that we've had 2 weeks to, kind of absorb the loss in the national championship game and look back over the entire season, I thought today would, be a good time to do that more objectively, considering it was such an amazing season of Michigan basketball. But before we look back on the season, Rod, I just wanted to go over a few developments that have taken place since losing to Louisville. The first of those is Trey Burke leaving, no surprise, and I think we all know that Wolverine fans had to expect that.
Oh, absolutely, and he had done everything this season that you could do, and some people would say, well, hey, what would he come back for? And if you really felt like you wanted to win a national championship and there was more to accomplish with this team, then there would be that reason. But for Burke, especially being projected as a top 10 draft pick, and with Marcus Smart from Oklahoma State backing out of the draft, he's probably the top point guard left. There's nothing more to come back for. I mean, your degree later on, certainly, but from a basketball standpoint, there's nothing else that he could accomplish with all of the awards that he won. and getting the team to the national championship game was just one game short of what the ultimate goal is. And I think he had really checked off everything on his checklist that he wanted to do. And his dream is really to play in the NBA. And he's really at that point now where you can't turn your back on any of those numbers or really the opportunity and where he is now.
You know, Rod, at his press conference when he made the announcement, I thought, hey, this is a slam dunk after these 2 years, gotta go. But, when he was talking about the process of should I go now or should I come back, it seems to me like he agonized a bit more than I thought he would have about making that decision.
Well, he seemed to a little bit. I think the more that he won the awards and the more that he realized he's the best point guard. I mean, you can argue with the Marcus Smart or whether he's a little bit better than that. But I think he realized he's a touch above everyone else in college. And to come back next year where there are no guarantees that you're going to have the same type of year, you're going to get back to the same point and maybe get some of the same breaks that you would get. You look at the Cody Zeller example from last year where Zeller might have been one of the top couple of picks in the draft, and he decided to come back and work on his game. And now he's maybe even out of the top 10. So from a number standpoint, that's huge for a prospect. Fans don't always see it from that number side where you're 2 or 3 million as a top 10 pick or top 5 pick maybe, and then if you drop below that 10, you're talking about maybe half of that. So that's not as big a deal, but it's a pretty big deal for the players and for their families. And really, the point that they're trying to make this decision for is to try to set their families up within the short term. And I think that's one of the decisions that he came down to is looking at, hey, I can be a top 7 pick, but maybe the 2014 draft is deeper than this year's draft. And am I doing myself a disservice by looking at next year when I don't have as much to gain?
Yeah, I think we all agree, though, it was a very good decision by Trey Burke. The other guy was Tim Hardaway, and, a lot of NBA types were saying that, staying another year probably would not have changed his draft position, even if he came back and had, maybe even a better season. So while he's less of a sure thing heading into this draft, I've seen projections all over the board on Hardaway.
I'm saying he's probably a second-round guy, but in his announcement, he just said it really didn't matter. He didn't pay attention to any of the projections or any of the scout stuff or even the NBA Undergraduate Advisory Committee that gives the official evaluations to these guys. He didn't pay attention to any of that. In his mind and in his heart, he felt he was ready to go, and he feels like he's an overcomer, and he's a guy who takes that chip on his shoulder, and he achieves even beyond that. And that was his reason for leaving is, again, there's not much improvement he can do to his game. Maybe the knock on him is that his handles aren't as good or he needs to work on his consistency. That's not going to change with staying another year, at least in his mind. That's something you can work on over the summer. When you get into NBA camps, maybe you raise your level up and you get your stock up to maybe a late first-round guy. Maybe that's the case. If some of these other guys do not declare for the draft that maybe are picked ahead of him, and maybe he slides into the late first round, or who knows, his dad being a scout for the Heat, and the Heat are going to have a late first-round pick, maybe that's something that's already earmarked. It's really hard to say, but I think his was more solid than Burke's was. Burke at least had to think through some of these things. Hardaway seemed like he had his mind already made up.
He had the benefit of having a dad, Tim Hardaway Sr., great player, and an NBA scout to, help him with that decision.
Yeah, and what he said is his dad really kept the gloves off and just said, well, hey, son, you can do what you want to do. This is your decision. And for a lot of guys, a lot of the experts and people that I've talked to have said, there's no difference between a third-year and a fourth-year guy. And the longer you stay in college, the more people get to break your game apart and figure out what things you haven't worked on or what all your flaws are. At least with freshmen and sophomores, you can say there's a lot of potential there, but you might need a little bit of work. If you're a junior or a senior and you still have those frayed edges, there's a lot more that those experts can break apart and just say, well, look, he's just not going to work on it. If he hasn't fixed it by this point, he just is what he is by now. So I think that fear played a lot into his decision as well in saying, what am I going to come back for to, maybe be a fringe first-round guy next year? I can't really raise my stock any more than I've already done. And so I think that factored into his decision. And he just said, hey, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. If I don't make the NBA, I can still play in Europe and have a great career over there and maybe someday get back to the NBA. But this waiting around and this trying to get better every year just may not work out for some people.
Yeah, I think a good decision for Tim, too. Last week, Mitch McGary and Glenn Robinson III announced they'd be around for another year, made a lot of people happy. So at least we didn't lose 4 players in this draft. Were you surprised that they decided to stay?
Maybe by Robinson just a touch, but McGarry not at all. I think players have been saying that he's the kind of up-and-coming captain material leadership guy. With losing all 5 of their seniors, losing Burke and Hardaway, he's the guy who can step in and be the voice of that team, be the face of that team. Robinson is certainly a little bit more reserved and doesn't talk as much. And I think they needed McGarry to come back, to have at least one player to build around. What their AAU coach said was that they would probably be a package deal, that if one came back, both would come back. If both went, they both would go. And they said the same thing in their press conference, too, that they're like brothers. They've been playing together and hanging around each other in Indiana for the past few years on their AAU teams, their roommates at Michigan. They really do a lot of their stuff together. And in trying to finalize their decisions, they went to the gym and just played one-on-one. They worked on their games a little bit. And both were asking each other, okay, well, have you come to a decision yet? And Robinson kind of asked McGarry, and I think McGarry was the last one. I think he made his on Tuesday last week of, okay, yeah, I think I will come back. And I think that sealed it for both of them is they're a tandem together. They're used to playing together. And I think that's what got them both at Michigan, was that relationship that the two of them have in really liking to play with each other and be around each other.
Yeah, and I think that they enjoyed this season, and when they look at next year, I think they just want to have another year of fun and being kids, so to speak, at least one more time before they consider that jump.
Yeah, and that's what McGarry said, is he wants one more year to be a kid. That once you step into the NBA, it's a job. It's a business. Every day you're going to the gym to work out, and they do it to a much lesser degree at Michigan. It's only during the year, and they might have light summer workouts and things that they work on their game for the following season. But in the NBA, it is a year-round conditioning, stay-in-shape process. It is your job. You don't have a day off. And instead of these 2 games a week where it's on a Wednesday and then a Saturday or Sunday, you've got a 3-game road stint. It's just wears on your body. It wears on you mentally. And I think what McGarry said was he saw that. He didn't want to jump into that just yet, where he still had some pieces of his game he needed to work on. And it's harder to work on that when you're going through the grind of a season. And we saw that this year, where he steadily built up. It wasn't that right after he got over his injury at the beginning of the year, he just jumped into the starting lineup and became a superstar. It took him time to get into shape. It took him time to get used to college game speed. And to make that jump 2 years in a row, I think was something he realized would be really difficult for him to do.
Well, Rod, a few days ago, Dave Brandon said if John Beilein wanted to finish his coaching career at Michigan, he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted. That's quite a vote of confidence, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I talked to Dave about that as well. And both sides seem to be not really worrying about it at this point. Beilein has said that after those 5-year stints in each of his other stops, that he really wants to stay here. And this is maybe the pinnacle of what you want to get to, is a big-time Division I program that you lead to a national championship game. And then you look at, well, how much more can I go on? I think his contract goes through 2016-17, and they may want to tack on a few more years to whatever that finishing time for him is going to be. Beilein being 60, and he seems like he's got a few more years in him to be able to coach and to be able to go through the grind. So I'd imagine sometime during the summer that we see some restructuring of his contract. Maybe it goes through 2021, who knows? And he finishes out his career here at Michigan. But with what he's done in these last few years and getting Michigan to the NCAA tournament for the last 5 years, I think is really a statement on the vote of confidence that Brandon has for him, and really bringing this program back, where not only is he rebuilding, he's just not moving on to another station. He's going to stay here and really try to take Michigan to that national championship level.
Well, Rod, do you think this season, and the last few really, have put Michigan basketball back on the map now as a destination school for the elite talent to consider?
I would think so. I think you need to follow it up next year with something else, because you can have these kind of flash in the pan sort of, I won't say similar to what Butler and VCU have done. Maybe a George Mason is a better example of it, where you've made it to the tournament, but now you've got to prove that you can go deep and make deep runs and get a few more top-tier recruits to come in. McGarry was a big get for them. Robinson was a big get. And I think what some of the young recruits are seeing is that you don't have to be a 5-star guy. They can make you into a 5-star guy if you fit in with the program, if you allow yourself to be coached. and you play the game. You play the team game that Beeline wants you to play. Nobody really saw Nick Stauskas probably 2 years ago as being as effective as he was. Mitch McGary really grew into his role. Robinson played out of position. Now they're talking about switching him to the 3 next year and playing small forward and moving McGary to the 4. So I think there's a lot of switches and a lot of changes, but it's showing Beeline can bend to what his roster is and make those players better and figure out a way. And I think when young recruits start to see that, hey, I'm not just a 2 guard. I can be a 3. I'm not just a big center. I can move around and play some 3, maybe play some 4, and do some different things. But in all of these cases, they're helping their game. The coaching staff is helping each individual player's game and making them NBA ready. And I think the number of guys that are considering the NBA, that are jumping to the NBA, if that's what your ambition is as a young recruit coming in, I think Michigan has become one of those places that you look at.
Well, Rod, as we mentioned at the top of the interview, sometimes it's best to, let a few weeks go by before you can fully appreciate what a season of excellence this was for Michigan basketball. But when you look back now, when the season started, we knew we had Trey and Tim coming back, along with Jordan Morgan, several other key players, but we also knew the incoming freshmen would need to contribute. In the end, did this freshman class, do you think, meet expectations, or did they far exceed them?
I think they far exceeded, because we didn't know what McGary was. We weren't quite sure what Robinson was again. Stauskas, we knew was a good shooter, but I think he developed that piece of his game where when they took that three-point shot away, he was able to go to the rim and be effective. Sure, there are some things that they need to work on, but as a whole, I mean, look at Karis LeVert that was projected just to be a redshirt, but for him to come in and to play key minutes and to make sure that you had a good 3-man rotation at the 2 and 3 spots. And we won't even get to Spike Albrecht that was just kind of a throw-in. He was an insurance policy of, hey, if Trey Burke twists an ankle, we've got a guy who can come in and play some point guard. He certainly exceeded all of his expectations. So I think all the way down the line, because of the uncertainty and how much you thought they could contribute at the beginning of the year, and I believe that when we talked at the beginning, I said, hey, if Mitch McGary can be a 6.6 rebound guy, Michigan can make a good tournament run. And he turned out to be that in the regular season, and that's coming in a reserve role. When he got in the starting lineup, I think that changed the whole tenor of the season, that they had a reliable pick-and-roll guy, a reliable post guy. They had their big monster in the middle who could get the rebounds for them and change the game defensively. Michigan finished probably near the bottom of the Big Ten in block shots, but you had a threat at least in the middle with McGary. And once that switch turned for him, once his game turned on and he played 25, 30 minutes a game, that's when Michigan became a different team, and I think that's what people expected as maybe a best-case scenario. If McGary is the one guy who's going to come in and be effective, this could be a different team.
Well, Rod, as we watched this team grow together during the course of the season, you heard Coach Beeline and Coach Alexander use a word quite often. It was chemistry, and they tossed that around. I think a lot of times a lot of us aren't sure what that means, but, whatever it means, it was evident as the season went along. These guys liked playing with each other, didn't they?
Yeah, it started in the summer when those freshmen came in, and there was so much hubbub about a team of 5 freshmen beat a team of 5 veterans, and was this going to be a Fab Five-like group? And those freshmen never took it that way. They never looked at themselves and said, we're going to run these guys off the floor. We're going to take their jobs. It wasn't that type of dynamic. They really liked to hang out, and they were really not just respectful, but they learned from that. The older guys took the younger guys under their wings. The best example is probably Nick Stauskas and Matt Vogrich. Vogrich started the first few games of the season, and as they started to get Stauskas going, there were some plays that he didn't know. Vogrich kind of took him to the side and said, hey, here's where you're supposed to be on this play. Here's the assignment that you missed. For a senior in that case to say, hey, I'm going to throw all of my pride aside, and a guy who's taking my starting job and ends up taking most of the minutes throughout the season, and I'm going to show him because the team is more important. The fact that he succeeds is going to dictate how our season goes. And those guys understanding that and taking action with that to make those freshmen better is one of the key parts of the season that really doesn't get talked about, is the 5 seniors that are the key reserves, and some of these other guys, really. I mean, Karis LeVert talks about how Trey Burke was his mentor, and they played one-on-one games together, and he beat Burke this one time, but Burke came back and said, well, hey, that's one game. Now we're going to play again right after that. And then he just dusted his socks off. But that competitive nature and passing that down to the freshmen, but really the freshmen not having that Fab Five attitude of it's all about us. People gave him that Fresh Five nickname, but they didn't take that as we're a five group. But, I mean, in the tournament run, you saw certain instances where all five of them were on the floor, and I don't think anybody would have guessed that at the beginning of the season, is that as you got down to the Final Four, you got down to the championship game, that you might see any more than three of those guys, but at that time you saw all five of them.
When you look back on that NCAA tournament run now, was there a moment that you thought to yourself, or a game even, that made you think, hey, this team could win it all?
I'd have to say it was that South Dakota State game. And that opener when, because there was so much question coming off the Big Ten tournament loss to Wisconsin about what this team really was. And at that time, we thought maybe, hey, they'll win a game or two. They might make it to the Sweet 16, and they'll get crushed by Kansas because they just don't have anybody to answer Whippy. And when Mitch McGary was announced in that starting lineup, it just said, hey, you know what? Beeline has put all his chips in the middle of the table and said, we're going to do or die with this guy. We're going to put our best five guys out there on the court and see what happens with it. And some people would say that Beeline is kind of a stingy guy. He's kind of stuck in his ways in his system or his offense. That was the sign that he's not that. He's gonna do what's best for this team and put the best guys out there. And when you saw what McGary did, I think he had a double-double. He might have had 14 and 12 or 17 and 12 in that first game. It was, this is a completely different team with a rolling big man, with a scary big man in the middle who's affecting shots, who's affecting the game, who's scoring the ball. The fact that he has a double-double and the other guys are still as effective. I think that was the game that Trey Burke had his first single-digit game of the year, but the rest of the guys, you had Robinson with 21, Hardaway with 21. You saw a different team, and they looked like a different team. And you said, well, hey, with VCU coming up, this really could start to develop into something. And I think also in the Kansas game, the way that they fought back, Burke's long three-pointer aside, the way that they fought back in those last 7 minutes to erase that deficit, and even get to a point where that shot would matter, I think showed a lot about this team and what they would be able to do, that they weren't going to give up. And I think that those lessons move forward to next year with the guys that stay.
Talking about the championship game with Louisville, Rod, one thing when I'm talking to fans I still hear them go back to is the difference in the game was that Trey sat too long in the first half. They're still questioning that. Do you still think that was the right move by Coach Beilein, even though Spike was playing out of his mind, that Trey sat for, I think it was 11 minutes?
I guess I'm on the other side on that, and I say that you come out of halftime with a lead, but if you come out of halftime with Burke with 3 fouls for whatever silly type of reason, I mean, that changes the way that game goes too. Burke had come out very aggressive in those first few minutes. They scored the first 7 points of the game. And the way that Spike was going, you've got to put that on the rest of your team and say, guys, you got to get us into halftime. Somebody's got to guard on the perimeter and stop those 4 3-pointers from going in. We've got to make sure we get a guy on him or shadow him. And maybe after the first one, after the second one. That's the scouting report on him, is that he's going to find a seam, he's going to be able to get open, and he's going to be able to make those shots. That you had a 12-point lead says, again, something about this team, but the fact that you gave it up says something else. I don't think Burke maybe was the biggest piece of that. I would question more that McGary, when he had 4 fouls in the second half, sat for a little bit too long. That's the national championship game. You put everything on the table and you slide those in the middle of the table at that point and say, if he's going to foul out, he's going to foul out, but we can't bide our time anymore. We've got to get a couple of stops here. We've got to maybe get within 1 or 2 points, and they never could crack that where they got within 3. And I think that was the difference. The thing at halftime, you had a big lead. You had an opportunity to blow that thing open. I just don't know if he trusted Burke enough to say that I can get him back in the game without him getting that 3rd foul. And if he did, then you have to play a certain way in the second half, and I don't think he wanted Burke to be tentative at all.
Even though we lost the big one, though, this was still just one incredibly exciting season of Michigan basketball, and I think as time goes on, people should remember it as just that, a season that you don't get that often.
No, and I think what happened last season and the previous seasons with you get to the tournament, you get one win or you lose in the first round, and you have that level of disappointment that this really was a special group of kids and a special team that you had together. And you can't expect it next year automatically either. That with losing so much in Burke and Hardaway, probably the best backcourt in the country, and now you have to bring in some young guys and move some guys around. It's going to be a different Michigan team. The one constant there is going to be Beeline, though, and that coaching staff and how they work with these kids and make them better. You have to be excited about the way that the freshmen got better throughout the year. And now when you look at Derek Walton and Zach Irvin and Mark Donnell, that maybe those guys come in and have that same level of excitement, improvement. I mean, who knows if maybe there's another scholarship guy out there that they go out and pick up that we haven't seen or we haven't heard about just yet. I think there's a lot to be excited about for next year, but you really have to look at how special this year was, especially given how unexpected. When the Big Ten season and that shot rolled off against Indiana, I don't think people had any inclination that Michigan would have the postseason that they did. And I think that's the great part about college basketball is that all of those teams get in. Everybody's got a shot to make it. And no matter what happened in the regular season, you start at zero, and it's a completely new season.
Well, I think at this time last year, Rod, a lot of us knew we had the 5 freshmen coming in. I think about this time last year, Spike was the final piece of the puzzle. When we look ahead to next year, we've got a talented group of freshmen coming in, and we don't know how that's all going to work out, of course. But do you think that the expectations are going to be really high going into the season? And right now, do you think they have the pieces to maybe be a Big Ten contender and even maybe an Elite Eight kind of a team?
Well, I think they've got the pieces to be a Big Ten contender. When you look at what Indiana had from last year, they're losing, of course, Oladipo and Cody Zeller and a few of the other guys, but they're bringing in another good recruiting class as well. Michigan State has a lot coming back. So I think Michigan is still in that conversation with McGarry and Robinson back, and depending on what we see with the rest of the freshman class that comes in. Elite Eight, I don't know. I would think that Kentucky, with their recruiting class predicted to be the number 1 team in the country for next year already with a whole new core of freshmen, I think a lot of teams are going to reload, and Michigan isn't reloading. They're just sort of retooling and creating that new backcourt, and I think that's going to be the difference for them.
Well, Rod, we have the spring, the summer, and the fall to savor the season, and I hope Michigan fans do. As we said, these kind of seasons don't roll around that often. So we have a lot to look forward to as Michigan swings back into action in November. As always, Rod, it's great to have you on the show, and I thank you for being a guest all during the season with us, adding your insight. And I already look forward to having you back on next season, and we talk Michigan basketball once again.
As always, appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again to Wolverine beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News for being our guest today. Coming up next, we wrap it up for another week with Wolverine Quick Hits here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, University of Michigan men's basketball freshman forwards Mitch McGarry and Glenn Robinson III announced on Thursday they will both continue their collegiate playing careers with the Wolverine basketball program. After gathering all the information and sitting down with my family, I have decided to continue my career at the University of Michigan, said McGarry. There is still plenty for me to work on as both a player and a person. Michigan is the right place for me to continue growing, and I am excited about what lies ahead. In a short period of time, this university, this community, and all the Wolverine fans have embraced me, and I am truly thankful for that. I look forward to representing Michigan with my teammates and to becoming a leader of this team. I will be staying at Michigan after careful thought and consideration, said Glenn Robinson III. This past season was an unbelievable journey and a great learning experience for me. I still have a lot of areas to develop in my game, and I am looking forward to doing that at Michigan with this coaching staff and my teammates. So great news for all we Michigan fans. In other news, the number 9 ranked University of Michigan softball team belted 2 home runs, including a grand slam from freshman Sierra Lawrence, who was again the Big Ten freshman of the week, to top Iowa 8-6 in Game 1 of a doubleheader, and then used an 11-hit attack and shutout from sophomore pitcher Sarah Dreisinger to take Game 2 8-0 in 5 innings on Sunday at the Wilpon Complex. The pair of victories extended Michigan's win streak to 21 games and keeps the squad perfect in the Big Ten with a 16-0 mark sitting atop the standings. The triumph in Game 2 marked the 15th run rule win for the Wolverines in 2013. Heading into this week's play, Michigan 39-7 overall and once again 16-0 in the Big Ten. Baseball used a solid pitching performance from freshman sensation Evan Hill and an inside-the-park home run from freshman Travis Mazes to take Game 1 of a doubleheader from Northwestern 5-0 Sunday afternoon at Rocky Miller Park. The Wolverines fell to the Wildcats 3-2 in 10 innings in the nightcap. Coach Eric Bakich has this young team playing very good baseball right now. Heading into this week's play, 22-16 overall, 8-4 in the Big Ten, and in the thick of the race. Other great news on the Wolverine athletics scene this week. Michigan men's gymnastics brought home the NCAA National Championship. That took place at Penn State over the weekend, and junior Sam Mikulik, who was also on the Olympic team, became the first University of Michigan men's gymnast to capture All-America citations in one championship while sprinkling in a pair of NCAA championships on parallel bars and high bar at the NCAA event finals, again held Sunday at Penn State's Recreation Hall. As a team, Michigan had 11 All-America certificate winners on the day and tied a program record for total championship citations with the 2010 team for the most in program history with 13. So congratulations to men's gymnastics, the 2013 NCAA National Champions. The women's team did not fare as well at Pauley Pavilion on the campus of UCLA over the weekend, but they had a great season, and junior women's gymnast Joanna Sampson won the national championship on floor exercise on Sunday at the individual events again held at the NCAA Championships Pauley Pavilion inside the campus of UCLA. Additionally, senior Kate Zarales was a national runner-up on balance beam. Sampson is the fourth gymnast in program history to win an individual national championship and first on floor exercise, joining Beth Weimer, uneven bars, 1993 through 95, Elise Ray, all-around in 2001, balance beam 2002, uneven bars 2004, and Kylie Botterman, who was all-round NCAA champ in 2011. So congratulations to the women's gymnastics team on a fantastic year, and to Joanna Sampson for being the all-around 2013 NCAA Women's Champion. You can purchase our show app for Android at Amazon.com and for Apple devices at the iTunes Store. It's an easy way to have the show delivered to you weekly, so please check it out. We're also being carried now by TuneIn Radio, or you can just visit our site at www.themichiganmanpodcast.com and click the play button. I'd love to hear from you anytime with whatever maize and blue thoughts you might have. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your audio feedback at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. So give us a call and hear yourself on an upcoming show. Or you can email your thoughts to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. I'll have the email address and the phone number on my show notes page if you did not have a pen or pencil handy to write that down. Well, even though things are slowing down on the Wolverine athletic scene as summer approaches, we don't take a day off here at GBM Wolverine. Visit www.gbmwolverine and sign up for membership today. Don't miss out on all the great coverage this summer or the always interesting give and take on our message board. But you need to be a member for full benefits. So come on, Maize and Blue faithful, visit www.gbmwolverine.com and sign up for membership today. Thanks again to our guest Rod Beard today from the Detroit News, Michigan basketball beat writer, and to Mark Snyder from the Detroit Free Press and Nick Baumgartner from MLive. Those are the three beat writers who have joined us all during this great basketball season. Thank you guys for taking time from what is your busy schedule, and I already look forward to having you back on the show next fall and winter, talking more Michigan hoops. And as I reminded you at the top of the show, we're going to our summer program schedule of 2 shows a month for May, June, and July. We're not going away, just slowing down to enjoy summer. We have some great shows planned for you, so please stay tuned through the summer months. Our next show will be broadcast on May 8th, then again on May 22nd, so mark that on your calendar. Until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week. Enjoy spring, if it ever gets here. And as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue.